Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. It's strange how laughter can sometimes hide the deepest betrayals. I used to think that the woman I married, the one who once smiled at me like I was her entire world, would never cross certain lines. But life has a cruel way of showing you that people change. And sometimes the person sleeping beside you becomes a stranger you can't even recognize anymore. My name's Daniel, and for most of my marriage, I believe I had everything a man could ask for. A steady career, a beautiful home, and a loving wife, Emma, or at least that's what I thought. We met in college, where she was the bold, outgoing girl who could light up an entire room with her presence, and I was a quiet one, the guy who'd rather stay behind the scenes. Somehow, she saw something in me, and I fell for her faster than I ever expected. Our relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real, or so I believed. We went through the usual ups and downs, like any couple, but we always found our way back to each other. At least, that's what I told myself. I was blind, or maybe I just didn't want to see what was right in front of me. Everything started to unravel one evening, in the most unexpected way. It was a Friday night, and my best friend Chris had come over to our house for a small get-together. The three of us had known each other for years. Chris was the kind of guy who could make anyone laugh. Charming, confident, the life of the party. I trusted him completely. We had grown up together, shared secrets, dreams, and even failures. I never once imagined that he could become part of something that would destroy me. The evening was filled with laughter, drinks, and casual jokes. Emma was in one of her playful moods, teasing, laughing, and flirting just enough to keep the energy light. I thought nothing of it at first. She always had a strong personality, and her sense of humor could sometimes push boundaries. But that night, something felt different. There was a tension, subtle, but sharp enough that my instincts picked it up. At one point, Emma poured another glass of wine, her cheeks slightly flushed, and leaned back in her chair with a smirk. She looked between me and Chris and said with a laugh, "You know, sometimes I wonder if your best friend has tried me, too. He's been around so much. Maybe he got tempted." The room fell silent for a moment. Chris chuckled awkwardly and waved it off. "Ha! Don't put me in trouble, Emma," he said quickly. "You know I respect boundaries." Emma laughed again, brushing it off as a joke. But I couldn't laugh. My stomach twisted, and something inside me felt wrong. I wanted to believe she was just being playful, but there was something in her tone, something that didn't sound like pure humor. It sounded like a truth disguised as a joke. I forced a smile, trying not to make it awkward, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I noticed the way Chris avoided eye contact after that. I noticed how Emma smirked just a little too long before changing the topic. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I laughed when expected, nodded during conversations, and pretended everything was fine. But my mind was spinning. When Chris finally left, I tried to confront her lightly. "Hey, that joke earlier about Chris, where did that come from?" She rolled her eyes and laughed again. "Daniel, relax. It was just a joke. You're so serious all the time. You know how close you two are. I was just teasing." Her tone was dismissive, almost mocking, and that bothered me more than the words themselves. I wanted to believe her, but the image of her sly smile and Chris's nervous laughter replayed in my mind again and again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake next to her, staring at the ceiling while she turned over peacefully. Every small sound, her breathing, the shifting of the sheets, felt heavier than usual. My chest ached, and I didn't know why. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to make my heart uneasy. Over the next few days, I tried to brush it off. But once you start doubting, it's impossible to stop noticing things. I started to see patterns I'd ignored before. The late-night texts, the small smiles when she checked her phone, the sudden changes in her behavior when Chris's name came up. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that jealousy was making me see ghosts where there were none. But deep down, I knew something was off. A week later, everything came crashing down. That night, I came home early from work. Emma didn't expect me. She thought I had a late meeting. When I walked into the house, I heard her voice from the kitchen. She was on the phone, laughing softly. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but when I heard Chris's name, my feet froze. "Stop. You'll get me in trouble," she whispered, her tone playful yet intimate. "You really shouldn't say things like that, not with my husband around." My heart stopped. I stood there, just out of sight, barely breathing. I couldn't see her face, but I could hear every word clearly. I know, she continued with a low chuckle. "You always say you're jealous of him. Maybe you should have made a move first." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. The phone call ended soon after, and she turned around, gasping when she saw me standing there. "Daniel, you're home early," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She hesitated, her eyes darting away. "Just a friend." "Chris?" I asked. Her lips parted, and I saw the flicker of guilt. Quick, but clear enough to break my last piece of denial. "Daniel, it's not what you think." She started, reaching for me. "We were just joking around, like always." "Like always?" I repeated, my voice barely steady. "You joke with my best friend about him being jealous of me? About him making a move on you?" She stammered. "You're twisting it. It's harmless." "No," I said, cutting her off. "It's not harmless when you keep saying things that sound like confessions." I walked past her, my hands trembling, my heart heavy with disbelief and pain. That night, I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just packed a small bag and left the house. I spent the next few nights at a friend's apartment. Try and make sense of everything. I didn't want to believe she had crossed that line. I wanted to convince myself that it was just inappropriate flirting, not betrayal. But the way she joked about it, the way she didn't deny it fast enough, it all screamed something deeper. A part of me died during those days. I kept remembering the vows we made, the promises she whispered when times were tough. And I kept remembering the way she laughed that night. Like my feelings didn't matter. Like everything sacred between us was just a punchline. I wanted to talk to Chris, to hear his side. But when I called, he didn't pick up. The silence on his end spoke louder than words ever could. A few days later, I finally received a message from him. "I'm sorry, man. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Please don't hate me." That single text shattered the last piece of peace I had left. I stared at the screen for a long time before turning it off. My hands were shaking. There was no need for explanations anymore. That's when I made my decision. The next morning, I walked into a lawyer's office and filed for divorce. There was no yelling, no confrontation, no begging for answers. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes when you've accepted that something precious is gone forever. When I handed her the papers a week later, she looked at me in disbelief. "Daniel, are you serious? You're ending our marriage over a joke." I met her eyes and said softly, "No, Emma, I'm ending it because I realized that what you call a joke was actually your truth, and I finally stopped pretending not to hear it." Her expression shifted from anger to regret, but it was too late. Some things, once said, can never be unsaid. Some lines, once crossed, can't be walked back. That night, I sat alone in my car for hours, staring at the city lights. The betrayal hurt, but what hurt more was losing two people I thought were part of my foundation, my wife and my best friend. It wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the disrespect, the lies hidden beneath laughter, and the realization that the love I believed in had already died long before I noticed. I promised myself something that night. I'd never ignore my instincts again. I'd rather face a painful truth than live inside a comfortable lie. The weeks that followed the divorce filing were quiet, painfully quiet. When you spend years sharing a home, a life, and dreams with someone, silence feels heavier than noise. I didn't just lose Emma. I lost the life we had built together. Every corner of our home felt like a memory, waiting to stab me when I least expected it. After I filed the papers, Emma moved out temporarily to stay with her sister. I stayed behind, surrounded by the remnants of a marriage I no longer recognized. The coffee mug she loved, the faint smell of her perfume on the pillow, the wedding picture that I couldn't yet bring myself to remove. All of it reminded me that love can disappear without warning, leaving only traces that haunt you. At first, I thought I'd feel relief. But heartbreak doesn't follow logic. It doesn't ask permission. It just takes over, quietly, completely, mercilessly. I wasn't angry anymore. I was empty. Days turned into weeks, and the world around me continued as if nothing had changed. I still went to work, greeted my colleagues, smiled at neighbors, and pretended to be fine. But the truth was, I was falling apart inside. People often say time heals all wounds, but that's only half true. Time doesn't heal. It gives you space to understand what broke you. And during those long, lonely nights, I started to see how fragile love really is when trust is gone. I kept thinking about Chris, my so-called best friend. He hadn't tried to reach out again after that one message. Maybe guilt kept him silent, or maybe he was still with her. I didn't know, and I didn't want to. Knowing more would only make it worse. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, how long had it been going on? Was it just flirting? Or something deeper? Something physical? I'd never know for sure. That uncertainty was its own kind of torture. One evening, I decided to go for a drive. The air outside was cool, and the city lights blurred through my windshield as if the world itself was crying with me. I drove aimlessly, ending up near the old cafe where Emma and I had our first date. I sat there for a while, watching couples laugh inside, and felt an ache that words couldn't describe. That's when I realized how much I'd been living in denial, not just about her, but about us. Somewhere along the way, we had lost each other. But I kept holding on to the illusion that love would fix everything. Maybe she didn't cheat in the beginning. Maybe the distance between us grew so slowly that neither of us noticed until it was too late. Maybe she found something in Chris that I stopped giving her. Attention, excitement, validation. But none of those maybes mattered anymore. Because at the end of the day, she made a choice. And so did I. A month later, she called me. Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Daniel," she said quietly, "can we talk?" There was a long pause before I answered. "What's left to talk about?" I need to explain. I didn't want to meet her, but part of me still needed closure. So I agreed. We met at a quiet restaurant, the same place where we used to celebrate anniversaries. She looked tired, almost fragile. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by guilt that she couldn't hide. "Daniel," she began, her eyes moist, "what I said that night, it was stupid. I wasn't thinking. I didn't mean it seriously." I leaned back, expression calm but distant. "You said it like someone who meant it." She swallowed hard. "Chris and I, we never actually—" She stopped mid-sentence. "But we did flirt. It was emotional, I guess. It started as jokes and small conversations, and then it got complicated. I should have stopped it." I nodded slowly. So it wasn't a joke after all. Tears filled her eyes. "No, it wasn't. But it wasn't an affair either. It was confusion. I made a mistake." Her honesty hurt more than lies ever could. It wasn't about what she did or didn't do physically. It was about the betrayal of intimacy, the choice to share parts of herself that should have been mine alone. I stared at her for a long time before speaking again. "Emma, when you said those words that night, you turned our marriage into a punchline. You didn't just break my trust. You mocked it. Do you understand how that felt?" She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I do now. I'm so sorry." I wanted to forgive her. I wanted to believe that maybe we could rebuild. But something inside me had already closed off. Love can survive many things, distance, arguments, even mistakes. But it rarely survives humiliation. We sat in silence for a while before I said softly, "I hope you find peace, Emma, but I can't go back." She reached for my hand, but I gently pulled away. "Goodbye," I said and walked out. That was the last time we spoke face to face. In the months that followed, I began to rebuild my life. Slowly but deliberately, I moved into a new apartment, started focusing on my career again, and even began therapy to process everything. I realized I had spent years putting others' emotions before my own, always trying to be the calm one, the forgiving one, the peacemaker. But this time, I decided to choose myself. Therapy taught me something simple yet profound. Betrayal doesn't define you. Your response to it does. At first, I carried anger like a heavy coat, but eventually I learned to let it go, not because I deserve forgiveness, but because I deserve peace. I stopped checking Emma's social media, stopped wondering what Chris was doing, stopped reliving the pain. Every time my mind tried to replay that night, I told myself, you already survived it once. You don't need to live it again. One Saturday morning, about 6 months later, I ran into Chris at a grocery store. For a moment, I froze. He looked older, tired, and nervous when he saw me. "Daniel," he said quietly, "I didn't think I'd ever see you again." "I didn't plan to," I replied calmly. He nodded, guilt clear on his face. "I messed up, man. You didn't deserve any of that. I lost everything because of it. Your friendship, my self-respect, everything." I looked at him, searching for anger inside me, but there was none left, only emptiness. "I forgave you a long time ago," I said simply, "but forgiveness doesn't mean things go back to how they were." He nodded again, eyes glistening. "I understand." And then, without another word, we parted ways. It was strange. The closure didn't come from confrontation, but from acceptance. I finally realized that peace isn't about getting answers. It's about stopping the search for them. Life slowly began to feel normal again. I started going out more, reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering hobbies I'd neglected. Photography, hiking, even volunteering on weekends. Things that reminded me that the world was still full of good, honest people. And somewhere along that journey, I met someone new. Her name was Leah. She wasn't flashy or dramatic like Emma. She was calm, sincere, and kind. She listened when I spoke and never made me feel small for having emotions. We started as friends, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't rush things. Leah once asked me, "Do you ever miss her?" I thought for a moment before answering. "No, I miss who I thought she was. But that person doesn't exist anymore." She nodded, understanding completely. That's when I knew I was healing. Months later, I finally signed the final divorce papers. It was done. There was no anger, no pain, just a quiet sense of freedom. I walked out of the courthouse, took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I felt light. Marriage, love, betrayal, they all taught me one thing. Never ignore what your heart already knows. Jokes can sometimes reveal the truth people are too cowardly to say directly. And when that truth comes out, it changes everything. I didn't lose a wife. I lost an illusion. And in that loss, I found something far more valuable in myself.